everyone, greetings from National Skills Network. This is Madhuri, and I'm so excited to touch upon a very different topic today from all the conversations we have done earlier. And this time we are going to look at the role played by advocacy, communication, and digital platforms in creating the impact we want to see in the vocational education and applied learning ecosystem, not only in India, but in Australia. So I'm so glad to introduce you to Miss Helene Rooks, who's the CEO of VALA. VALA stands for Victorian Applied Learning Association. So welcome to this talk, Helen. I think in India, most of us are hearing applied learning for the first time when we talk about vocational and skill-based courses, because in India, mostly we call it like either skills or vocational or work integrated. And I would like to know more from you about VALA and the importance of applied learning.
Okay, thank you so much for having me, Madhuri. It's a real, as we said before, I feel quite humble because I represent Victoria in Australia, which is only considerably quite a small part of Australia, and talking to India as a huge continent itself with so many more schools than we look after. So, yeah, I run the Victorian Applied Learning Association, also known as the Vocational Applied Learning Association. We have been around for 20 years, so we're in our 21st year, and this is my 12th year as CEO. And I think it is probably one of the most rewarding and maybe a bit challenging as well, but I think every education job is quite challenging these days. But it's very rewarding because I firmly believe in the power of vocational and applied learning, not just for those students that are not academically underlaid, but for every person. So we see, and it was interesting, Madhuri, when you're talking about applied learning and skills education and vocational education, and they're all like a bit of a melting pot. And you introduced me to skills education, and I find that really, because when we're talking skills, we don't just talk about technical skills. We also talk about 21st century skills, and in applied learning and the way we work with teachers, we focus a lot on the 21st century skills, which we call power skills. We don't call them soft skills, we call them power skills because they are identified as most important for young people to have when they enter the workforce. Applied learning we see very much as a pedagogy. It's not a certificate, it is a pedagogy. It's the way you teach a person a skill or a skill or convey knowledge. It's through doing and having a clear connection with the real world and not textbook based. And in Australia, vocational education is very much a separate and also separately auspiced part of education, and that runs from certificate levels all the way through diploma and advanced diplomas. So in a nutshell, we are a teachers association. So we work with teachers in secondary school predominantly to basically give them the skills and knowledge to work in an applied learning way.
Yeah. Yeah, so as we understand applied learning and the focus on pedagogy that you mentioned just now, it assumes, I think, a lot of importance, especially in today's context. Like if you look at the big picture, we are talking about artificial intelligence taking over jobs, or artificial intelligence coming into the educational ecosystem where there are talks about what is the new role for teachers. I would say this also impacts the students, because when the students join the workforce, I think now the question is, what is it that you can apply, or what is it that you can do for us or build for us, rather than what knowledge you bring with you, which is very theoretical, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah, totally. And what we see in Australia as well is that a lot of employers, they are looking for somebody that has those soft skills, and
Yeah,
that includes critical thinking, which is really important in a time that we are more and more relying on AI. Young people need to have that digital literacy, and they
yeah,
need to be very strong critical thinkers. A lot of employers say if they can do that, and if they can communicate, and they can look at me and talk to me instead of doing everything by text, or um, then I can teach them the technical skills.
right.
As so as an entry into employment for Australian employees, that is really important.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah,
yeah.
I think even here in India now we are emphasizing a lot on what we call them as transferable skills. These skills have a lot of names all over. The it's also known as 21st century skills and all that. But whatever be the name, I think we agree that these are the skills that are like the stepping stone for a successful career and also I think a good life for anyone. So now coming back to the applied learning ecosystem, I'm sure as the CEO of VALA and even otherwise, you would have observed quite a few developments in Victoria. And with specific reference to VCE VM, VCE, for our audience, I would like to elaborate. VCE stands for Victorian Certificate of Education and Vocational Major. This is at the school level in Australia, in Victoria. So I've had the opportunity to visit few schools in Melbourne and also meet you there. So I'm bringing back those memories and also trying to get back to the discussions we have had earlier. So regarding the pathways in Melbourne, in Victoria, can you give us a few examples maybe and how it is received by students and parents particularly?
Yeah, I'll go a little bit further back before I answer your question, because I think what we have in common, Victoria and India, is that we're both on a pathway where vocational education and skills education is being mandated in the curriculum. We had a Victorian Certificate of Applied Learning about 20 years ago, or 24 years ago, as a response that one size doesn't fit all. That certificate started to have some reputational issues, and it's a global issue that vocational education and training has reputational issues, and that makes me cross because it shouldn't, because it's a very rich area of education. So what happened through COVID, the Curriculum and Assessment Authority in the Department of Education in Victoria started a major senior secondary reform.
Okay.
And in that senior secondary reform, they basically replaced the VCAL, the Victorian Certificate of Applied Learning, with the VCE vocational major, and also another certificate, which is at quite a low level. Um, so what happened there is that, so in our certificate, these certificates are delivered in year 11 and 12.
Hmm.
And I just had a conversation with Hand India as well before I came to this recording. And I really admire, and this is a step that that Victoria is undertaking now, is to start earlier.
Hmm.
And you guys are starting at grade 6, 7, and 8 already, and it's being built in. What has happened with the new certificate of the VCE VM is that there are more students, a lot more students are actually doing the VCE VM than they did the VCAL. And we're talking about 44% more students. So I think it's probably now 3 out of 10 students in Victoria does the VCE VM. As part of so the VCE VM, and I talked about those 21st century skills, we have personal development skills, we've
Yeah.
got related skills, we've got literacy, we've got numeracy, and we have a vocational and education and training component. So that's where a student chooses a vocational pathway, and that is mandatory to get the VCE VM. They can do that as through coursework, doing a 2 or 3 in community services, or building and construction, or you can also do that through an apprenticeship. So
Oh,
school-based apprenticeship, where a student goes to their home school for 3 days a week. They go to the workplace where they are employed and get paid for
mm,
1 day a week, and they go through their vocational education training, often as at a different provider to do their learning of their vocational education. So
yeah.
that's sort of how we work it in Victoria at the moment.
Yeah, and also I can see it is quite well integrated now with the overall school curriculum. The way you have explained, how the pathways work. Also, I would like to know how it, helps them in going to, like, say, the higher education or taking up something like a TAFE qualification. How does this connect? Perhaps that would also be nice to know from you.
That's we always said if you do a vocation, if you know you're not going to go to university,
Yeah.
you can still go to university with a vocational education, with a vocational major. It's
Mhm.
a different pathway. So in
Oh,
Australia, if you do your scored Victorian Certificate of Education, you can have direct entry into the university.
mhm.
More and more universities are now also getting VCE VM students to access straight away.
Oh,
You can also, if I would be, say, do a pre-apprenticeship in plumbing
mhm.
in my high school years, I'm actually already 2 years ahead than
Mhm.
if I would finish my normal mainstream 12 years of education in Victoria, and then go to a TAFE.
Yeah.
Um, and it's the vocational education and training that they do as part of their vocational major.
Mhm.
It's a TAFE qualified. It's in the same system
Yeah.
uh, that the TAFE delivers.
Yeah. Okay. So this gives us a bit about the big picture also, like what you just told us. And I would request our audience, if they have any queries or questions, they can always send it to us. You can also answer them because some of these terminologies like TAFE, for example, technical and further education, these are some new terminologies that might get introduced. And one request to our audience is to subscribe to our YouTube channel and hit the bell icon so that you don't miss any update from us. So now let me proceed with the the core contribution from VALA, which happens to be in the space of professional development of teachers. It would be nice to know from you, how does it work? What is VALA exactly doing for helping teachers to acquire professional skills, or community building or research, or what are your core areas? Perhaps you can also share one or two examples of the programs you conduct and offer.
Okay, so and this might be a bit controversial, the first thing we tell teachers that come to us that are from a mainstream teaching, mainstream VCE, and that have always done the textbook delivery of the education and the chalk and talk, as we call them, with the old-fashioned chalkboard and your blackboard and a chalk, that they need to basically unlearn how to teach, because as an applied learning teacher you become a facilitator of learning. You're not the stand at the front of the class, so you need to also give over some responsibility to your students. And that is really hard for teachers, because teachers, and I can say this myself because I am one, are control freaks. They want to know that everything is under control, and to give responsibility to young people, teachers often hesitate because they don't think that young people can step up to the mark. And I have never seen students that when it comes to the point, they will step up to the mark and they will surprise you. I've delivered applied learning for many, many years myself with some of the most disadvantaged young people in Victoria, and it is just the most beautiful thing. So, first of all, forget the way you're teaching. Don't look at the curriculum, even. You need to
Mm.
know sort of broadly what you're delivering, but you need to build relationships with the students. You
Yeah.
need to know where the student is at. And that is not just in their learning, but also emotionally and socially.
Yeah.
Uh, and I think, and then you start working with the student's passion.
Hmm.
And if that's a connection with your own passion, so you need to know the passions of your teachers or your colleagues as well, because we're building this ecosystem around a young person. And it's very individualized. And that sounds a lot of work, and it is initially a lot of work, but it always pays off because then their behavior and their engagement just really thrives. So that's the first thing. So what we do is we just did our induction day because at the start of the year we have a lot of new teachers that have been given an allocation in the vocational major,
Mhm.
and they don't know the applied learning pedagogy and they don't know the curriculum. So we guide them through so we don't do the technical things, that's the curriculum authority.
Mhm.
We do the organic thing and translate it in what it looks like in the classroom.
Okay.
So what we also do is very bespoke webinars. We do some webinars as well, but we also do very bespoke masterclasses in terms of how do you coordinate a VCE vocational major because there's so many moving parts in it. It's like work placement, it's your vet enrollment, it's it's integrated delivery and assessment. So we do that. We do subject specific
Hmm.
as well. So we have a very popular, a lot of maths teachers do not understand, or a lot of people don't understand the value of numeracy,
Hmm.
how numeracy is different from maths. Um, so numeracy is all, that's literally a maths together, and it's applicable to a young person's life. Um, what else? We talk with so when I spoke about the reform that we went from the um, Victorian Certificate of Applied Learning to the VCE VM, one of the things we did in that space is when they first put the curriculum out for consultation, we
Hmm.
realized there was no applied learning in it.
Hmm.
So we argued very hard and fast to actually include applied learning principles in the curriculum because we would have lost a whole heap of students. Um, we also always, as I mentioned, we had that whole disparity between the VCE and and the VCAL, VCAL being the poorer cousin. And that was also the messaging that we got from government
Hmm.
because it was always the VCE results. Nobody talked about the VCAL results. Well, I think that was really an area where you can make life-changing impacts on a young person. So we lobbied very hard and fast. When we had COVID, you might know that Melbourne was probably one of the most locked down cities in the world for the longest period of time. And straight away there was special consideration for VCE students
Okay.
that were doing their exams. There was nothing for the applied learning students
Oh.
and vocational education students. So we did a bit of a survey, and that resulted in millions of dollars being poured into catch-up funding for the vocational education and training,
Mhm.
as well as special consideration for applied learning students. Because if you have two systems in the country, you need to acknowledge them and
Right.
value them
Yeah.
equally. So I think that's probably been one of my biggest advocacy points that I'm very proud of. Um,
That's so nice to hear, and I'm sure you have put in a lot of effort over the years to reach where you are with, advocating this kind of teacher development and professional development programs that VALA is offering. And I think to some extent in India also we are facing similar issues, like the mindset of the teacher when he or she is asked to teach these subjects. And so there are quite a few things that are being discussed these days, and it's very nice to see a lot of positive discussions happening around it and acknowledging the fact that teachers also have to change. Now, before we close this very interesting conversation, I have just one question to ask you. Is there anything that you would like to share with our audience as a piece of advice in the changing times? I think it would be most appropriate you can share something for the teachers in India.
I think what I used to say, what I noticed is that in the applied learning space, we had this conditioned humbleness. And we were like, oh, I'm an applied learning teacher. And the students had that same, it's that whole, I'm not good enough. I'm a failure in education. I am.
Mhm.
And that made me really sad, but also really angry because every person is equal and we should not be feeling like that because we are measured, the world is being measured by a different standard. So what I say is loud and proud. Be loud and proud about who you are as a teacher, what you teach, and be loud and proud about your students and their achievements because that's the only way we are going to change this.
Yeah.
That's my advice.
Yeah, amazing. That's, I think, a very powerful and inspiring message for all of us, taking pride in what we do. And I think that's the only way we can instill a lot of good and positive feeling in the vocational and applied learning initiatives that we take up. So thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your experience, your views, insights with our audience. And we look forward to be in touch with you.
Absolutely. Love working with you and I look forward to connecting in the future. And to your audience, all the best. And you're doing an amazing job.
Thank
And
you.
be proud.
Thank you.